Hello and welcome to the Gooner Talk, back again with you guys for another episode of what is our Eat, Sleep, Arsenal Repeat podcast. Joining you every Thursday evening here in the UK and slightly earlier over in the States. I'm very happy to be joined, of course, by our regular guest. I'm joined by the Doc. How you doing, Doc? Good, you well?
Yeah, doing well. Yourself?
Yeah, not bad, not bad. Also joined by Sophie. How are we?
It's late for me. It's 11 p.m. where I am in the world. So, let the doc brag about his day just starting, among other things, in the green room,
Yeah, 9 p.m. here.
Midday.
9 p.m. here. No, it's nice. I think it shows the interconnectedness and the kind of the commitment that Arsenal fans show across the world at different times to have a chat and enjoy the footy as we did last night, or last lunchtime if you're based in the States. Yesterday, of course, with Arsenal taking on Brentford in the Carabao Cup. I want to do a little bit of breakdown of that, and then we'll start looking ahead to obviously this weekend. And there's a few bits of news, of course, to talk about as well. But Doc, let's talk about what was a hard-fought 1-0 win in the end. It was a very changed squad, very changed team. A youngster was given a debut, Charles Sago Jr., given the opportunity to play, which I found great because quite literally 24 hours prior, I was being told in my chat box that Arteta never gives youth a chance. So that was poetically brilliant that it happens that evening. But yeah, let me know what your thoughts of the game was, mate.
Yeah, I mean, like you said, tough game away at Brentford, and they played a pretty strong squad, right? So I thought what really stuck out to me is that in years past, if we had made this many changes, it would have been a team that looked very fragmented and non-cohesive. Whereas this season, they looked way different in terms of fluidity, in terms of rhythm, and so that was really impressive to me. And then, of course, the win is great, but I thought the process in the second half didn't play as well. But still, everyone, I think, dug in. So both halves were quite different, but they also showed how this side can, get the job done when they need to, and they've done that on away all season thus far, right? It's almost like they have a little bit more focus and edge on the road compared to when they're at home, where they might be just relying, we're at home, we're going to win this game, which tends to lead to a little bit of sloppiness. Whereas on the road, you have to be locked in. So that's an interesting trend I think to follow. Of course, liked seeing some of the guys. ESR, of course, was in there. Reiss was in there. Sago, as you mentioned. So I enjoyed seeing these guys get more playing time, and seeing Havertz get more kind of bedded in. Seeing Aaron kind of going back and forth with some of the away fans was always fun, and seeing him show what he's capable of. So I really enjoyed it. The Kivior had a great debut. Toney was excellent as well, right? So good challenge. There's a really good challenge at the club pass. So it was a good game.
Yeah, so arguably it was the biggest game of our season, the Carabao Cup. It's a prestigious tournament that I think everyone should respect with the utmost.
You're such an arsehole.
I can't even get through that with a straight face. But I enjoyed it. I was there, and I did enjoy it. There was kind of this. I put a tweet out with the live blog that I was doing, saying this could be the most important game of our season. Very tongue in cheek, obviously, but. The evening played out interestingly, Ben. We talked a little bit about this after the game because City getting eliminated kind of opens up a little bit of Pandora's box about the League Cup, because as soon as City are out, it's like, oh, they're not going to win it there, because you just assume that they're going to win the competition. Like, they enter every competition, you expect them to win it, even though they didn't win it, of course, last season either, because Manchester United did and had a fairly simple run to the final, which they beat a very good Newcastle side in the final. But yeah, how did you feel about how the kind of the tournament after it, transpired that we've progressed without Man City following us through?
Well, the first thing I thought of was you, actually, and I wondered if if you had changed your mind after your ranting news show the other morning, which, by the way, can I just say I loved. I think it's one of my favorite ever Tom Canton news shows. Not only the Carabao Cup bit, but the Ivan Toney bit was just gold, absolute radio gold. Yeah, I mean, I think you always have to look at it differently, right? If Manchester City go out of anything, whether it's the Carabao Cup, the FA Cup, and even the Champions League, this is a tournament that we haven't won in 30 years. Last time we won this, Super Kevin Campbell was playing, 93. And I think there's... Wow. Okay. Now you're just making... Now you're double arseholing down on me. It feels to me like there's something about the League Cup this year that I felt it a little bit before. I think I chose us to win the League Cup. And maybe it was because I'm a sucker for numbers, and we won it in 93 and here we are in 2023. And I think that it's a competition that this team can win. And what we need to do, Tom, is I know that people diminish this cup has been diminished. And that is by media, that is by managers, that is by fans, but it's silverware. And for this team to kind of win something and get that taste and feeling and build that culture of winning, I think it's really important. And how you do that, I don't think it matters if it's the FA Cup or the League Cup. And I get fans are not going to want us to go deep in this because you've got Champions League, you have the Premier League. Everyone can point to what happened last season in terms of injuries and cup games and not sacrificing enough to win the league. But when like City are pretty much a shoo-in to win the Premier League, and a lot of these players weren't part of that FA Cup winning team now that Mikel Arteta inherited in his first season at the Arsenal. I really hope we can find a way to balance and manage it. This is the first season for me. It felt like Pep Guardiola didn't really give a toss about this tournament, this competition.
How dare he?
How dare he? But he's taken it seriously, hasn't he? Season after season, and they've won it multiple times. So I think, Liverpool look good. Of course, we got West Ham next, a London derby. That's not going to be easy. But why not go for it and go for it with the players that you're playing? Give them a shot. It doesn't have to be Odegaard. It doesn't have to be Saka. We could do what Pep did. I'm not saying play our first team, Tom, but let's go for it. Why not?
Yeah, look, I think that, I said this to you afterwards on Twitter, or X, sorry, that, that it changes things. And, factors like City exiting the competition should, make you change your mind about things. It's certainly a big factor. And I always said from the start, to be fair, that the only reason we should be, really getting knocked out is if it's a team that are deservedly better than us, which City are. I think there are other teams like Liverpool that look very, very good this season, obviously, as well. And obviously last season we got knocked out by a very good Brighton side when we rotated quite heavily and they didn't. So I kind of was expecting to get knocked out by them in some senses because they have a very good squad and we rotated very heavily. But we have now got West Ham away in the next game. And that game falls in between Sheffield United at home and then an away trip to Newcastle, which is obviously a very difficult one on a Saturday evening, 5:30. So well done, TV broadcasters. Thanks for scheduling that at 5:30. That's going to be great. We'll all be staying over in Newcastle with, I'm sure, no exuberant hotel prices because it's now a 5:30 game. I'm sure it's going to be really, really cheap to stay out there. But when it comes to that fixture placement and the added pressure on the schedule, do you think that's a fair concern to when I kind of talk about how I'm kind of a bit indifferent about the tournament because I just think there's so many bigger fish to fry in that sense?
Yeah, I mean, in an ideal world. Okay. So if you want to go.
No. I was just
so it's like, I was just like, God, there's League Cup.
I mean, yeah, it's tough to battle on four fronts, right? So at some point, but I mean, I think you like we saw in versus Brentford, there is the depth potentially, with this team to be able to do that, especially if you get players back from injury, right? So, I mean, the majority of the players who played weren't first teamers, right? Weren't starting 11. So the depth is certainly there. It just really becomes a matter of, can you get players back and not have these guys who are normally playing in, playing as a backup now having to play more minutes as a starter, right? So then it becomes, now you might have to go to your third and fourth string players in a Carabao Cup, which then of course opens yourself up to risk, right? So there's so many considerations going on. Playing every 3 days for the most part it's just in rotation, and you have guys playing year round now, all the time due to international. And so it's all a consideration more than it ever was before. People always ask me, why are footballers getting hurt more often? Dude, they're playing more games than they ever have in the history of the game. So that's why you have these top managers saying these guys need rest. So, I mean, it's a really, really tough decision and balancing act. So I think Mikel does value the cup. I think he understands the value of winning. I think he understands the value of getting players into these knockout games, because there's a different pressure that comes with knockout games, right? And you can only adapt to that if you've played in them. And so I think he values it, but at the same time, it's just that risk reward proposition.
I don't agree that he's valued the domestic trophies over the last couple of seasons. I think he's actually sacrificed. Last season, he sacrificed both cups, I think, for the pursuit of the league. And I'm not saying that was wrong, Doc, at all.
Yeah.
I'm saying with the depth on this current team is what I mean.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm talking this iteration.
Yeah. I mean, this is a great opportunity for this squad to, if you look at the kid that played yesterday, another Haylender, right? I mean, what a great opportunity for him. Kivior, had a decent game. Tomiyasu, even though we need Tomiyasu, he's brilliant, and he can play in the first team, and he has done, of course. But be a great storyline as well for these some fringe players, but also those players that don't start week in, week out, to kind of deliver a trophy for the club. I don't think we should sacrifice, when you say bigger fish to fry, Tom, what do you mean by that?
I mean that. Oh, Sophie's coming. There we go. I wasn't kicking you out. I swear, you exited. How dare you question me? Get rid. No, I think when it comes to like the whole bigger fish to fry, my idea of that is that I just see things as higher priority in the list of what I've got on my mind for Arsenal. Like I've got the Premier League and Champions League in kind of this joint, but I'm kind of eking the Champions League slightly higher than the Premier League, just because I think we've got a really great chance of that competition this season, more so than the Premier League. So I kind of look at the Champions League and then the Premier League, then the FA Cup, which is a competition I love. And, there's such a romanticism about the FA Cup because of our history with it being the greatest domestic cup competition in the world. And then beyond that is if the Premier League isn't something we're going for, we need to make sure that we're in the Champions League again next season. And so finishing in the top 4 or 5, depending on what it's going to be for this season, is really important. And then for me, it's the League Cup. So that's when I say we've got bigger fish to fry, is that there's this idea that there are things we need to have and must have before I think about the League Cup as anything more than a bonus in that regard. I wouldn't trade the League Cup, as I've talked about, for Champions League qualification next season. I'd rather have a shot at the Champions League next season than sacrifice potentially getting into that with a deep run. I'm not saying that you have to sacrifice it, to go down. I mean, to be honest, if you're going deep in the League Cup, we should be good enough still to get top 4 without question.
Right.
So does that make sense?
Yeah, it makes sense, but at the same time, we don't have that winning culture. And when Manchester City's the bar, right, and you look at how Pep has managed, his team, his squad over the last few seasons, the insatiable pursuit of victory time and time again, there's no excuses. And as I said, this is the first season it felt like he sacrificed this competition because he has bigger fish to fry. And the fish that we fried, we haven't even eaten it, because we haven't won.
This, by the way, this fish analogy has gone way too far.
Way too far. But I think it's a great opportunity. I'm not saying, play the first teamers. But for me, when you talk about developing hunger and winning, this is a great opportunity for Mikel to do that. And he talks about it. So back it up is what I'm saying. Let's not keep being the almost team. Oh, we almost won the Premier League. Oh, we gave it a good shot in the Champions League. No, let's bloody win stuff.
Yeah. I think that what we're in a position to do this season is something a lot more competitively than what last season was. The squad is deeper, but and this comes back to injuries again, Doc. Like, I can't help but get frustrated with how many players we're missing. It looks like Trossard and Martinelli won't make this weekend. Saka hopefully will. Reiss probably won't be risked. Partey's ahead of schedule, which is a good thing. Hopefully he'll be back for the Man City game potentially, or maybe even the Lens game, so we can give some of them maybe a few minutes before the Man City game. That's really important if we can do that. But I can't help but get really frustrated with the injuries that we're getting. And the question I have for you is that if these keep happening, is there something to be said about a change of do the crosshairs change? Does the target not change in the sense of like we should not be aiming as high, but should the expectations of fans be tempered somewhat because of our luck of injuries being horrific? Not just like we didn't prepare enough in the summer, but we lose our first, then second choice DM, first and second choice left winger. We lost Gabriel Jesus at the start of the season. Who knows what his knee could turn out like the rest of the season? These are mental injury problems. It's not just like what teams should prepare for with a deep squad. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you have that many injuries, of course you're going to have a downtick in performance, right? Naturally. I mean, how do you overcome that? So that's really difficult, especially when you have multiple injuries in the same position and positions that are integral to how Mikel wants to play. And so, I mean, that's just that. Then again, at the same time, there's other teams who also have suffering through injuries as well, right? And so injury, it's tough because injuries are part of the game. And like you said, injury luck does come into play as well. And so it's just when this many amount of injuries, you just have to do the best you can to get through them. Luckily, none of them seem to be long-term other than Timber thus far. And so, I mean, let's see. But if you have I remember, what was it, 2 years ago when we started, the team had COVID and everyone was like, oh my God, the club has started. Like 7 of the starting 11 were missing, right? And so how do you expect to have results when you don't have the players you want on the pitch? That being said, I think we saw during yesterday's match that there are players who can step up, at least in the short term, to be able to bridge the gap. I think it's really just a matter of how long term the injuries become. Now, if it's a week or two, you can make do. If it's longer than that, and you're talking about sustained games, and a lot of those players who aren't used to minutes are getting heavy minutes, now they're open to injury. And that, I mean, of course, they're in a fatigue out. Like we saw with Emil last night, second half. Clearly not, his fitness isn't there, right? And he kind of petered off second half. So that's something you would suspect to happen over time with players whose fitness level isn't there, right? And so I think it has to be taken into consideration. It has to. As much as we want to, of course, we have expectations, but you also have to look at the realities of the how healthy your roster is.
The January window might be an opportunity for Arsenal to strengthen and to maybe try and catch the injury issue by the tail and deal with it in some senses. It's also a window that could see the availability of a potential striker, and that striker is, of course, Ivan Toney. I've talked about him at length, and I wanted to kind of open the floor up to you guys and, of course, the chat box to get some of their thoughts on this. Sophie, you've got a wry smile on your face.
You know why? Because the chat box are just delivering on every level right now with regards to fish. It's quite spectacular, and I'm really trying not to laugh out loud. That's why I've been grinning for the last 5 minutes.
Probably my favourite from John. There's a time and a place for fish analogies. Oh yeah, that's brilliant.
It's very good. Very
Absolutely
good.
Love it. But yeah, let's skate on through to this different topic here. And talk about Toney, because I'm not, my view on it. I don't know if Raj, you've seen my kind of views on Toney. I did a whole article today talking about why I'm not convinced as well by the idea of Toney. In short, for those that are listening for the first time, I just feel that Arsenal in 2023-2024 going into next season, trying to establish themselves in the Champions League and close the gap to Man City, I'm not convinced Toney's the guy that does that for us. Yes, I get the argument that he's better than Nketiah, and Toney and Jesus is a better combination than Jesus and Nketiah, but for me, we should be looking to upgrade on Jesus, and then Jesus becomes the replacement for Nketiah, and you level things up in the pairing that way. I also think that stylistically, Jesus is kind of if you look at a model of what I think of an Arteta striker, I want that, and I want it to a higher level. Whether that exists is a different question, of course. And I think I'd rather wait until the summer to assess what options are available then than rush in and invest in that spot that we've got maybe available in January with Toney. But Sophie, what are your thoughts on this debate about Toney?
I think you and I align where he's concerned. I think that he's been phenomenal for Brentford. He has an asset that we've lacked, I think, even since maybe Giroud left. You know, a target forward that you can just pile crosses into. It's a shame Kieran Tierney's not here anymore. But, you know, that's the type of... And Arteta just doesn't want to play that way, does he? But I do think that sometimes we lack a plan B. But what does that plan B look like in terms of the way Mikel Arteta likes to play? And a lot of the times for us Arsenal fans, we talk about that plan B being more of a target man. I think his stats are a little bit overblown. He scores a lot of penalties. But he's strong, he's physical, he knows the Premier League. And I think there's a reason why many Arsenal fans like him. I think the one thing that for me, I'm not going to try and, you know, kick a man while he's down, but character has a lot to do with Mikel Arteta and how he recruits players and that DNA profile, Tom, that we've talked about before. Is he going to be? Is he going to come back stronger, better mentally? I think he's the type of player that will. But is he the type of player that fits into the culture of Mikel Arteta's Arsenal? I don't think so. And talent-wise, I think you're right. If you want to elevate the team, you've got to go for a more prolific, more elevated, more kind of superstar type player, because Jesus offers so much, and I still feel like some Arsenal fans don't appreciate him in terms of what he does for this team, because they want him to score goals week in, week out. And maybe he should. But when you have 15 goals from Saka, 15 from Odegaard, you had Martinelli last season, scoring goals isn't our problem. I think you wrote something, Tom, which I thought was really great about scoring goals isn't our problem. Creating chances is maybe one of our problems.
We're 12th in the league for big chances created, and we're 8th in the league for shot conversion. I want to be higher in terms of shot conversion, but if we are second in the league for big chances created and 8th for shots converted, you know, we're still going to have far more goals than we have now.
Yeah. And to me, that stat is alarming. If you want to win the league, you've got to be better at that. If you want to progress, you know, to those elevated City levels, you've got to be better at that. So does Toney change that? I don't know. But I'd rather we went... I'd rather, and Osimhen's come up now because of everything that's going on at Napoli. And, you know, but he's the ilk of player that I would love to add. After you get a Declan Rice, you spend 105 million and you're thinking like he's one of the best midfielders in the world. That's what I want to see Arsenal do. The striker, look what City were able to do with Haaland. They won the treble. That would never have happened if Haaland wasn't in that team, Tom. Never.
No, I agree. I think that he did elevate them to that level. They wanted to go out and bring the player in that was going to take them to the side that would win them the Champions League, and they did it in the first year that they had Erling Haaland. And that's what can happen if you make the perfect signing. And Arsenal, for me, should only really be trying to look to make perfect signings at this stage. Now, the Kai Havertz deal, obviously, Raj, is split people. And I want to encourage patience. I want to encourage time, but people have a right to be concerned about that situation because we invest a lot of money, and we've seen other clubs invest less money in more impactful players like Szoboszlai and Maddison and players like this, you know. So I think people have a right to be maybe a little bit, you know, concerned or even critical at this stage, but not... I don't want to write players off at this early in their Arsenal career, especially after the 3 years he's had at Chelsea. But for me, I think we have to be making the absolute peak perfect decision in that striker department when it next becomes available. And I just don't think Toney's that. But tell me your thoughts. You might tell me I'm wrong.
No, I agree with both of you. I think we're at the stage where you have to look for world-class players to really raise the level and raise the project to the next level, right? So spending that 67, whatever Brentford's asking for, right? We know the numbers will be inflated in public because they always are. But whatever that number is, 50 plus, I don't think I'd rather use that on a player like Osimhen, like a Ferguson, potentially. All that's going to be a massive bidding war, I think, as well. And so to really get the striker you want, right, who can take you to that next level. So Agree with you guys. In terms of Kai, I actually played quite well yesterday in general. So I think he's coming along. I think he's a guy. It's tough when you're adapting. I think the key for me yesterday was when Zinchenko and Jesus came in the game, he went to another gear. He's a player he's an IQ player who really relies on the quality around him. He's not a guy who's going to take someone on, right? He's a connector. And whether that's, the price tag is the price tag. He didn't dictate his price tag. So I always find it unfair to grade a player based on the price that he had nothing to do with. But, his role on the team is a connector right now. Does he need more confidence going forward in the final third? Absolutely. But once he finds that, I think you're going to see that next evolution of that advanced 8. And man, I mean, I know everyone makes fun of it, but dude, he's a monster off the ball, man. He really, really is a monster off the ball. And I think it's part of why Sophie mentioned part B. I think Mikel's multiple times this season versus Tottenham, for example, the plan A has been to sit back and use the press as the main weapon, right? And I think a lot of that is due to our out of possession play and how good it's gotten. So, it's an interesting evolution for the team. Of course, it's a work in progress, but I think in general, you're 100% correct. We're at the point now where we have to spend money on world-class players.
Yeah, absolutely. We have to go and try and get the absolute elite option that is possible. Sophie, I don't want to go on too long about Ivan Toney because it is obviously a thing. I want to get your thoughts, and feel free to be as blunt as you like on this. But how much does the social side of the Toney situation, should that come into our thinking in any way, shape, or form? From just to give you kind of my view, do you think that a player like that has to go through that situation with a betting problem, that he's getting help for it, and I think that's great. I think the fact that they've identified that that's an issue and he's getting the help that he needs is fantastic. I've never had the issue with the betting side of things. That's not been a problem for me because people have situations and stuff and they have to get help for certain things. The issue I had was always the videos regarding the disrespect towards Brentford. That was kind of the issue I had with the player. And people have seen those videos. What do you make of that? So is that in any way, should it be a deterrent for that deal?
100%. When you, in any walk of life, any industry, when you hire somebody, you take into account a lot of facets, right? And when you're investing millions and millions of pounds, you have to be a little bit more ruthless in terms of the criteria. And I'm not saying that Ivan Toney isn't a good person. I'm not saying, and I'm certainly not judging him. However, if I'm looking to invest for Arsenal Football Club, I want a clean slate. I don't want anyone with baggage. We all have baggage in some way, but the less baggage we have, the better. We've seen other players with gambling issues. We've seen players with drinking issues, all of those things. And I hope that he's kind of seen that he made the massive mistake. But for me, just to think you're a professional footballer and you're betting on games, in the manner in which he did, and the velocity, is that the right word? Just the sheer numbers.
The number, I suppose, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it's alarming. So everyone deserves a second chance, Tom. There's
Absolutely.
No doubt about that, and he deserves a second chance. But do I necessarily want his second chance to be at the Arsenal? I don't think so.
Yeah, as I say, like the betting thing for me is it's kind of that you have that, and then you have the social media post. The social media post is where my head's at in kind of one of the blocks. But I do think it's important to point out that, and to have the undertone, and the main reason I wanted to bring it up was because something that often gets kind of aimed at people that maybe aren't as keen on Toney is that you're only saying you don't want Toney because of these things. And whilst I think that it's a factor in the decision-making process, it doesn't create an agenda for me. And all of the decision-making behind why I'd rather sign somebody other than Toney is based purely on the football side of things. And I just think that Arsenal need to move for a player that is of a higher caliber than Ivan Toney. Raj, just to get some of your quick thoughts, and then we'll put a bow on that section.
No, I'm pretty much on board. Same exact thing. I understand all the off-pitch concerns, but for me, just from let's say none of that even existed, from a pure footballing perspective, the phase of the project, I think we're past Toney, right? Especially when it comes to opportunity cost. If you can use that money, let's say, for a player that's going to be a different level of player, right? And I think the club has shown that they're willing to spend, right? So I think we should be spending on guys who can really push the top limit of the team.
Yeah, sure. The weekend we've got a trip to Bournemouth, and we are going to be without a number of first-team players. Sophie, did you feel like anyone on Wednesday played themselves into contention and should start that wouldn't have been starting if it weren't for those injury issues?
I think Tommy Asu is the one that just springs to mind immediately. And this is an opportunity, isn't it, Bournemouth, to maybe rest a couple of players. Sorry, I just saw a comment. It's not about me. That some people are upset about my Toney take, but that's my opinion, folks.
I've been having it all week.
And I respect yours as well. It's just not my cup of tea, not my kind of player. And you know what? I see him at Chelsea. I actually could see him at Tottenham, but I just don't see him at the Arsenal. I think Tommy Asu, Tom. I think that he was great. I think he showed leadership as well the other night. Seems to be, is it me, or technically does he seem to look improved this season? I know it was like Brentford in the cup and whatever, but Brentford's still a really good side. It just seemed to me like his touch was a little bit sweeter. His positioning was even better. I
think he's better there.
Do you think so?
Yeah, I think he's good at fullback. I like him at fullback, but he's not going to do the things in the final third that you want from a fullback. I think Ben White does things in the final third that Tommy Asu can't do.
I agree with
his
that.
Combinations with Saka are better. I think that the way in which he can invert and bring the ball in field is better than Tommy Asu. Tommy Asu's a better, for me, defender than Ben White. And good centrally, better than Ben White is. And I'm really glad that Arteta made the choice to start White at right back and Tommy Asu at centre back rather than the other way round. So I think on paper, you see those two on a sheet, you would put Tommy Asu right back and White at right side of centre back. So that's the way we've come to expect those two to play when they're on the field together, unless Tommy's at left back, of course. And I just feel that when Tommy's working in a smaller section of the field, he can do a lot more. When he's
like for Japan.
Yeah, exactly. He plays left centre back for Japan. He had that game against Germany, was absolutely brilliant. The problem is I agree with you. I think he's the type of player that played himself into contention. But if he comes into the team at the weekend, it's probably going to be to play right back. It's not going to be to play in either of the centre back positions. So I think Ben White had a bit of an off-ish game on Wednesday night. I wasn't wildly enthralled with his game. Arteta berated him at one point in the first half. He shouted at him across the field for, I think it was his potential positioning. He did make up for it and did like a little sweet move for a couple of players, then played the ball inside to Jorginho, and he got a big double thumbs up from Arteta when he did that. I was watching it quite closely. But his performance didn't inspire me in that game like it had done in the majority of last season. I think if Tommy Asu is going to come in, it would probably be to play at right back, which despite all of his strengths he showed. So I think it's great that we've got someone that can give us real depth at centre half, especially because Kivior looks more adept, Raj, at left back. I've really enjoyed Kivior's performance at left back. The block he made was unbelievably good, of course, but his passing is good, his movement's good, he calls for the ball and all of that sort of thing.
Yeah, I think we've seen him play at left back position multiple times now, right? Even that great move, which was the Kai pass, ended with Reiss missing the shot. That started with Kivior finding Zinchenko as an outlet, right? Ball went to Jesus, and then Kai made that great run. So he looked super, super comfortable doing that. For Tommy, I think part of it for him, like he went a long stretch without playing much due to injury, right? So it takes time to rebuild match confidence, match rhythm, match fitness. And I think Mikel might have seen that tape from Japan and been like, dude, I need to play this guy at center back just because he looked so much more comfortable, right? And then, for the multiple reasons you said, I also think he might have wanted Ben there to play because obviously there's the new right wing rather than Saka. So maybe, bet him in better too. And so, and he's looking better and better. The question with him is just, avoiding soft tissue injuries, which have plagued him throughout his career thus far. And so, that reminds me one thing. I want to shout out a post the post that you made about the Ben White passing stat. I didn't see anyone mention that during the game. If you want to give some background, I don't remember. I didn't see any.
Yeah, I did my winners and losers piece afterwards, and I got the sense watching the game. I was like, Ben's not really passing to this kid. Like that's how the feeling I was like. There's times where he was kind of making runs or moving in space, and I thought Ben could pass it, and I was like, he's not passing to him, and I was like, that can't be right. And I wrote it in I put Ben White into my losers section because I thought he was probably one of the less high performing. I only put Ben White of all the players. The other two were like more talking points, like fixture congestion and fitness demands and things like this. But this morning I woke up and did the show and I said the same thing. And a lot of people in the chat box agreed with me. They were like, yeah, he wasn't passing to Sago Jr. And a lot of people, turns out, had the same view as me. So I was like, oh, I must be pretty vindicated. And then I was doing the show with Umar on the Arsenal Way. And Umar brought it up as well. So I was like, I'm just going to do a quick thing on Wyscout and see actually how many times he passed to Sago Jr. And it turns out he passed more to Sago Jr. in that game than he passed to Saka against PSV and he passed to Saka against Spurs. So I was completely wrong. Like he was passing to him. And I think it was obviously passing more so in the first half than the second half because he came off in the second half. I think it was about 7 in the first and 3 in the second. But it's amazing how and this is why I always say to people, the eye test is not foolproof. And stats are really important to provide context. So important. And it's things like that which I think prove it. But go on.
No, I just wanted to I always find it, I think, especially online, there's so many people who try to avoid being wrong. So I really appreciated someone being like, hey, no, my feeling on this or my eye test was wrong. And I think it's so important to understand we have to marry objective data with what we're seeing, right? It's not one or the other. They both inform each other. And even if Ben hadn't passed to him, it would have made sense. These are two players who've never played together at this level, right? In a real game. So I actually would have understood maybe why he's not passing to him for whatever reason. There's not that chemistry or cohesion there. But I just wanted to call that out because I appreciated someone on Arsenal Twitter actually being like, hey, I was wrong.
He's going to do it again. He's going to do it again in February when we win the Carabao Cup.
Oh, I wouldn't have been wrong.
That's true.
I wouldn't have been wrong. I had some people say I'm not allowed to celebrate now if we win that tournament. I said, we're going to be coming for you if we win that tournament. I'm like, look, I'm an Arsenal fan. I the Community Shield is a bit meh. I'm not wildly fussed about the Community Shield and winning it. But I tell you what, I celebrated when we won it. Because I'm an Arsenal fan. It's just my opinion that I don't rank the League Cup as highly as some other people do, and as much. It doesn't mean I can't celebrate.
No, it's true. I love giving you a hard time over it. Super Kev always says, he's like, Soph, when you take that team photo, it's always a lot more fun when you've got something silver in front of you.
It's right for him. He was on the field. He was actually doing the winning. Very, very different. Speaking of that, I don't know if you saw this, I loved Martin Odegaard at the end of the game, took Charles Sago Jr. over to the fans for his moment, also took over Mohamed El Neni as well for his moment of return too. So that was fantastic to see. A couple more things just before we come to the end of the show. Reiss Nelson, Sophie, Trossard and Martinelli aren't going to be available from the sounds of things. Should he be the guy starting on the left wing?
I would love to see him get a shot starting a game. I think he's earned it. A lot of the times we talk about players earning their position in the team, or at least getting an opportunity. Like, I couldn't believe it when I read your article today that it's been 499 days since Emile Smith-Rowe started a game for the Arsenal.
For that.
Unreal number there. And yeah, I would love to see what he does with a full, at least, starting, and maybe if he's subbed or whatever at 70, 80, 90 minutes, but just to see him get the majority of the game and how he can influence it in that position. There's a reason why we re-signed him. 2 of our premier players are out. Give Reiss Nelson a shot 100%.
Yeah, for sure. Any other surprise inclusions, Raj?
No, I was going to say on Reiss, he certainly earned it. I thought he was excellent yesterday. Even just his ability, his confidence receiving the ball when in the middle of the pitch was something haven't really seen from him that often, right? And so I really saw that level of play and that attack confidence from him taking that next step. The only reason he might be limited in minutes is due to fitness. He played 80 plus, hasn't played much. So I think if he does start, like Soph said, he would probably be subbed out earlier just to not have that huge spike in minutes. Same thing for Emile, and Mikel even touched on that after the game, saying he's had a big spike in minutes and kind of just overall intensity. So something you have to keep an eye on.
Tom, can I just ask the doc a real quick a quick question? It came up. One of the speaks. He's on one today, isn't he? Is this the third room that you've moved to, by the way, Doc? I'm losing count here. I was reading something that like a premier Manchester City YouTuber had talked about and mentioned, in the sense that these fringe players who come in, we expect miracles from them, right? Because they play, for a top tier team, or they have achieved X, Y, or Z, or not, or they're supposed to be the next great thing, but they're not quite ready yet. When they get their chance, we expect all these miracles. But also from a fitness point of view, they're not match fit, right? So they're coming into games cold. I was wanting to ask you about that. Like, our expectations sometimes may be a little bit too high, and maybe we're a little bit too harsh in our criticism afterwards.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you see it all the time. Maybe it's like the FIFA Ultimate Team conundrum, in my opinion, where people think someone can just drop in right away and fit in. But there's so many other variables, whether it's fitness, whether it's rhythm, whether it's cohesion with teammates, right? There's all these other things that come into play in terms of how effective you're going to be. And so I think it's always, I always find people to have expectations that are a little maybe too elevated for some of these guys who haven't played much. It takes time to adapt, right? And so I'm always like, I think when I watch a new player come in, you have to view it through a lens of full context, not just within that singular game in a vacuum, right? And so I think I'm 100% with you, on board with you.
Cool. Interesting.
Last thing, just before we go to the personal goals to end the show, just want to address this comment from Anur in the chat, who says, I think TC is influencing his views on Toney on his panelists, not only here, but on the Arsenal way as well. Trust me, Sophie and Doc can form their own opinions. They're very, very good at deciding whether I'm right or wrong on topics, especially Sophie's not afraid to tell me when she thinks I'm wrong. So Anur, I can assure you that is not happening. Doc, feel free to chime in as well. Am I influencing your views in any way? I'm going to take that silence as agreement.
No, it's a hard no. I think if you've watched us before, we all have the same mentality when it comes to buying new players. It's always been trying to find players who are at a certain level and world class, and we're applying that same principle, right, to Toney. So I would say don't conflate agreement with influence. Just Tom really has none. Sorry.
Very good. Very good.
Brilliant. Let's go on to goals. My goal is to phase the Doc out of my life as far as possible.
That's my wife said.
Doc, tell us how your personal goals go. I know we've talked a couple of weeks now about overtraining and overdoing it sometimes. Have you managed to measure your life in more reasonable terms?
Yeah, definitely been better. I think, I don't know if we talked about it, but it's not a new theory, but something I'm applying to myself. Let your hard days be your hard days. Let your recovery days be your recovery days. So combining some of my stuff into one day, like my harder workout with the sports day. So the next day I can actually allow my body to recover. And it's been significantly better. And I think the next step for me in terms of goals, if we're going to do that, is just how to adapt to more travel, which is, I think someone had mentioned that before, but I think Soph might be able to talk about that too, but how to adapt your, some of your fitness goals to if you're traveling a lot. So that's the next iteration for me.
And Soph, I wanted to ask you as well, because I know that you've got a lot of stuff going on as well. How have you found the support of kind of people around you in kind of focusing yourself as well?
Yeah, I mean, it's really tough. And in these times, you tend to look after yourself less, which is never a good thing, right? So for me, I've tried to find an outlet while I'm here. If I can't go every day, even if I could just go every other day for like an hour to the sea. And today I went down there and I was pretending I was a football player actually recovering from injury. And I was running in the sea and I was doing jumping jacks and I was doing all sorts of things just to kind of make it. It was fun for me cooling down as well, but at the same time, I was trying to help myself by doing that. So yeah, and there's just a lot to balance, isn't there, for everybody? Sometimes you've got work, you've got things going on in your life, and a lot of the times now we're all juggling different things. It's not just one job, you're doing 2 or 3 different things. And so personal self-care sometimes takes a back seat, and that's kind of the worst thing that can happen. So that's the one thing I'm really trying to work hard on is I'm eating a lot better while I'm here because I've got some home cooked, not that I don't eat home cooked food there, but I'm really focused on a Mediterranean diet while I'm here. And that's been a really good thing. So that's been one of the bonuses, lots of protein and salads and olive oil and all that type of stuff.
You feel like you can carry it over back to the States, or is it just not feasible? I know it's obviously easily accessible out there more so.
I definitely, I've generally got a healthy lifestyle. However, there's more temptation, to just grab a pizza or grab an In-N-Out. Yeah. So in those moments of being busy, you tend to go for the quick fix, the quick service restaurant type of solution. Yeah. I do that less here.
I'm still on kind of the losing streak. Another low on Monday, 92.5. I hit on Monday, which I'm very happy about. But what I would say is my discipline's definitely slacked a little bit food wise. Like Brentford do a really good jam donut. That's all I'm going to say. It was very nice, and I just saw it. And I was like, that temptation just got the better of me in that one. I was like, I will regret it if I don't have one. I'll be on the train home hungry and thinking, I wish I'd have one of them donuts.
It was the cheesecake last time, wasn't it, Tom? It was the cheesecake.
An unreal cheesecake. It was unbelievable. It was actually a joke how good it was. Yeah. But I'm at Bournemouth at the weekend, so I'll report next Thursday. And I'm in France on Tuesday as well. So I'll tell you what the Bournemouth and Lens food was like. I'm expecting a lot from the French, on Tuesday. I'm expecting plenty. Continental breakfast, it's going to be great. I'm looking forward to it. It's going to be a good trip, I'm sure. First time driving abroad, so that's exciting. I've got to do what you guys do and drive on the wrong side of the road. I don't know why you guys do that. It's so strange. But yeah, driving over on the right, doing everything the opposite is going to be very
Why are you driving? Strange. Why are you driving, by the way?
It's cheaper for starters to drive. Eurostar and travel is insanely expensive. It's only a Eurotunnel over and then an hour and a half into France and you're there. So it's actually like it's probably quicker to go there than it is to go to Bournemouth on Saturday. That's kind of the difference. It's not far at all, driving wise for me.
Very nice.
Yeah. Lovely stuff.
Are you taking Harry with you? Are you sharing the gas, or
he's not going? Sadly, Harry's not going to be there. A few of the journalists are making the trip. Some of them aren't. Some of them are going to Seville instead. I'm not sadly going to be able to go to the Seville one, so they've picked the hot Spanish version instead, which is good for them. But it's going to be my first away trip in Europe for a game, for an Arsenal game at least.
That's brilliant. Brilliant.
Yeah, I'm excited for it. It's going to be great. Thank you to everyone joining us in the chat box. Really appreciate your time, and those listening on Catch Up and watching on Catch Up as well. Leave your comments and thoughts on anything that we've discussed today. Raj, thank you for your time, my friends. Very much appreciate it. Tell people they can find you and what you're going to be up to.
Yeah, thanks for having me. You can find me at 3CB Performance in New York this weekend, so I can watch the game at a reasonable hour, at least 10 a.m. instead of 7, which is nice. And then I take back what I said earlier. Tom does have some info. He has medium level.
You read my tweet earlier,
Yeah, the chat. I did. The chat box took it very harshly. What I just said.
No, they're messing.
I know.
They're good stuff. At 3CB Performance on Twitter and, of course, on YouTube as well. Make sure you subscribe to Doc's YouTube channel and, of course, following him on socials for all the latest insights injury-wise. And, of course, his football opinions, which are semi-good as well. Sophie, thank you for jumping on, mate. Appreciate your time. Tell people they can find you, what you're going to be up to.
Thanks for having me. I've resolved the internet issue now. The next one is to get in a room that doesn't echo so much. These Cyprus. Is it good? Okay, good. Highbury squad, and this Saturday our women's show. This is a WSL, so our women's show kicks off this Saturday, which we're really excited about. Demi and Ariaga will be hosting that. And then Super Kev and I will return for a very cool episode of Monday Madness. You won't want to miss that. So thanks for having me, Tom. And thanks to all the talkies in the chat box.
Oh, we're not starting this. It's not happening. The talkies is not. It can't. It sounds like a really bad telephone award ceremony. Is what it sounds like. Yeah,
it's like the Razzies. Like the Razzies.
Honest, the Stopies. I had on Friends. I remember as well.
I'll stop now.
Yeah, thank you, chat box. Thank you, everyone. Massive thank you to Raj and Sophie as well for joining me. Owen will hopefully be back next week. He was sadly working this evening, couldn't join us, but we send him our best. And yeah, have a fantastic evening, day, afternoon, wherever you happen to be in the world. And we'll see you again soon. And as always, up the Arsenal.